Now we have transaction route and the operations.py put in our folder now, right? Right now, what we want to do is that when we get a particular user, right, we want to see all the transactions that that particular user has made, right? We want to fetch all those transactions. So what we'll do is that we'll go to um so what we'll do is that we'll get to um the transactions route, right? Right now I'm currently in the transaction route. So I'm going to try to create a new endpoint that will help me to create to get all transactions for a user, right? So get all transaction by user ID, right? So we say transaction route dot get. Why are we using get? Because what we are going to enter here is just one entry, not a set of data, but one entry, and that one entry will be the user's ID, right? Get all transactions, right? Get transaction all user transaction. Let's do it like that. Get all user underscore transaction, right? So when the user enter the ID, you need to fetch transaction. So let me put a comment here. Endpoint to fetch all transactions of a user by their ID. So now when we have that, we need to now create is an asynchronous def get underscore transactions, right? So we are going to do, what are we going to pass? We are going to pass an ID of the user, which is going to be an UUID, right? But it's not here, and also it's going to have a DB, which is going to be a session, and that session will be equal to depends on get DB, right? So this is a function, so we need to leave this. And then the first thing, when you get that ID, we need to check database if the user exists first. So we are going to say fetch user by ID. We are going to pass this ID that is coming, right? ID is equal to ID, comma, dbase is equal to db, right? Remember how we use we've used these fractions already, these functions already, right? So we are first, when the particular ID come, we are going to check if the user exists first. So we should be able to fetch the user, right? But then the UUID is underlined, meaning that it is not here. So what we'll do is that we are going to import it. So you go to the top here, from UUID, import UUID. Okay, so we are going to import it from there. Okay, now if the user exists, now we are going to fetch, right? If it doesn't exist, this particular function already has a status, an exception status that will handle exceptions for us. So what we'll do is that we are going to get database called transactions. So it means that at this point the transactions are already existing. So what we'll do is that we'll do db, we'll query the database, right? But we are going to query transactions table, the transaction model, right? Dot filter. Filter here, we are going to filter in such a way that the transaction column, one of the column will be owner ID, right? Such that the owner ID is equal to the ID that is being passed here, right? Dot, we are not going to do dot first like how we used to do, but we are going to do dot all, because we want to get all of them. First we just stop at the very first one to get only one item, but dot all meaning that we are going to get all of them. So if all of them are coming, they will come as a list, right? If they all come as a list, meaning we need to retain them as a list. So transactions, right? So this is going to be a list of the items from the database, right? So this is quite ready. I hope you get it, right? So it's going to be getting the database. This one is going to check if the user exists. If the user doesn't exist, it will throw an exception. If the user doesn't exist, then it will continue. If the user already exists, it will continue. If it doesn't exist, it will throw an exception, and then we will query the database to get all the user from the transaction table, where the owner ID for that user is equal to the ID that is passed. Then we get all of them. Okay, So currently this is okay, this is quite okay. So what we'll do is that we are going to try and now run this in the front end. So let me run the database, right? Control. Wow, so we have closed everything. So basically we need to activate, do a lot of activation over here. I'm activating the database, the virtual environment, cd app into the app. I'm cd into the app. Then I'll run my UV now. So everything is complete. So we go to the front end, right? Sorry about this. We'll go to the front end, we'll refresh. Then we'll have now transaction, or at the transaction, or we have transaction, create transaction, and also get all transactions. So let me open this. And then the ID, we need to pass an ID. So like we're going to try it out. We need to pass an ID here. So I'm going to the database, go to the users. So here, Agnes, right? I'm going to copy, right? I'm copying the that of Agnes. I'm going to put it inside the front end here. Remember to clean the strings, right? But then first, before I run that, I want to make this in 7. I want to make an error in the ID to see. Let me execute that. So it is saying that detail, there's no user with the provided ID. So it is rightfully put to return for us. Then the status code is 404, as we can see. But then let's go back to 8, right? The correct, this is a correct ID now. I'm going to execute this, see what is happening. It's a list, that's a square bracket, a list of map. So JSON object, that's like dictionary, right? So this is just one object, one transaction. So you see it is returning everything. It is returning title, description, cost, date created, the only item that we have in this particular user's name. So if you go to the database and we check the transactions table, you see that this is the only thing that we have, right? This is the only thing that we have, and the owner ID is the one that we fetch. Okay, but then if you go to the database and then let's fetch the ID of the other person, carry doesn't have any transaction, right? Carry does not have any transaction. So what we'll do is that we'll go to, I'm coming here to control V, cleaning everything inside. I'll execute it. Yeah, so this is the response body. It's empty, so we have an empty list over there. Square bracket is for a list, so the list is empty. So what we'll do is that we'll go back here and create some additional transactions, right, in the name of carriage, but not just one, but like 2. Okay, so I'm trying it out. The title is, let's say, we bought cream, right? Description, replace a finished body cream in the house. Let's say it costs, this one, the type, this one is an expense, so we are going to say it's an expense. And then we are going to say the transaction is the cash, the cost is 50 Ghana cedis, and then the owner ID is going to be the one that we copied, right? That's the carriage own. Then the medium, so this one we paid with cash in the market, we paid with cash. That's the owner ID, right? Which ID is this one? So I think there's an error. We need not to have that thing. We're not supposed to have this. So let me copy this, so I will not come back and clean this again. So going to transaction ID, right? PD models, where are the PD models? Let's see what's happening here. So there's an additional ID which is not needed, right? So we go to the front end again, refresh, try it out. I don't want to copy all those plenty things, so let me paste it, right? This one is not needed. So this is the model that we have. cache, and then we don't have something like the medium. The medium is a cache, right? A expense. So I'm going to execute this. There's an error, right? So we are expecting something includes in double quotes. Which one? Yeah, I need to remove this last comma. You need to always remove that last comma. We've gone through that error before. So it is created. This is created. Let's create another one, right? By here, let's say it's an income, right? Let's call it mm, sales, right? Sold one bag of rice, right? That's what we did. This one is going to be an income, and then the cost is the one that we sold, let's say 150 Ghana cedis, and then the owner ID is the same person. The cash, the person paid with MTN Momo, right? So you can see I execute that, then we have this in the name of carriage, right? So what we'll do is I'm going to copy the carriage ID, right, so that I can get all transactions in the name of carriage. So I'm going to the all transactions route, which is get all transactions. So I'm going here, expand, try it out. I'm going to put his ID there so that I can fetch all the transactions. Right now we know that it has, let's go to the database first, then public transaction. Let me refresh. We can see that we have additional transactions, but all two of them, just look at the owner ID, two of them are in the name of carriage ID, right? So we are going to see they're expecting not just one object but a list of them. So I'm going to execute this. So yeah, this is what we have now. So um we have one carriage, right? The carriage with, this is the cream item that you see, and then the type is a cash, and the type is an expense made, and then it's talking about sales again, right? And now it's going to be now MTN Momo, and everything is well done and well created. So we don't have an issue with that. This is all good. This is all good. This is all good for testing and everything. So we are able to create these things into the database. This is how to get a list of the items. Then you can further make changes to them, right? To have this is a transaction in, you can also create a transaction out Pydantic model, so that when you come here you can also decide to use a list. Maybe if you don't have, you can put a response model, right? That will return a list of the transaction out, right? So that you can control what should come out and what should not go out. For example, maybe I don't know, for this particular, for the list of transactions, maybe you don't want the owner ID to come out again. Maybe you don't want the owner ID to come out again for each of them. So you define a transaction out model, right? That will capture that and make sure that owner ID is out of the transaction out model, then something like that. And also you can remember to use typing. From typing you import a list, like how we do if you want to use the list as a response model, right? So let me just quickly show that. You can see from typing import list, so that when you go to the get all transaction comma response model, right, the response model is going to be a list of transaction in, not transaction. Transaction is a database model, but what you pass in this list, always in the response model, it should be a Pydantic model, not a database model, right? So if you just do transaction like this, it will return an error. You will be facing an error. Yes, this is it. The error is showing in my distance. Whatever should be here should be a Pydantic model, not a database model. So transaction in. Transaction in is a PD model, which is something here. I did not create a transaction out, that's why I'm putting it like this. So you can control whatever will go in and whatever will go out. Then we go back to the front, right? So remember, for the Pydantic model, we just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items to show, not those dates created and things are not coming. So when we go to the front end, right, and then we run this thing again, you can see for each of them we just have this thing coming out. It's well controlled, right? Well controlled for what comes out and that. So this is what we have now. But if we don't have that, everything that we had as we see it first will all show up. This is how to control this and have you manage how data goes out and come in for transaction. Yeah, let's complete all the other database model in another session.